Great. So we're live at this event focused on the power of art and storytelling to address antimicrobial resistance. My name is Stephen Hoffman. I'm the Chief of Staff at Wellcome Trust and really delighted to be here with so many people from around the world and many more joining online through the webinar. I see tons of participants have been brought in and more are coming in. And indeed, this is being hosted today very much because it's the World Antimicrobial Awareness Week. Everyone joining, if you know or not, antimicrobial resistance is one of the biggest global health challenges facing us. Over 1 million people die every year from antimicrobial resistance. And unlike many other challenges, this global health challenge is unfortunately getting worse every year. Each year, more and more people die from antimicrobial resistance, but it's also a challenge that not everyone knows about. And so then when we think about the power that art and storytelling can bring to ignite action, there's no better time to talk about this at World Antimicrobial Awareness Week, but also there's no better time for this particular webinar, given it is coming and coinciding with an amazing workshop that's been hosted here at Wellcome Trust in London, organized by the Global Strategy Lab and the Immersive Storytelling Lab, bringing people in person from around the world, from the arts, from science, from policy, really with that question in mind of how do we engage people, how do we use stories, how do we use the power of art. And so today's webinar, delighted to be with so many folks to ignite that conversation and really looking forward to participation. And so what I'll do is for those who are joining online, please do type into the chat box a bit of a welcome. Let us know who you are, where you're coming from, and we can start there. And of course, one thing we will do towards the end, after I've had a chance to invite some of our in-person experts to share some of their exciting thoughts and wisdom, we will also have time for questions and answers. So there is, for those joining online, there is the Q&A function, which we will be using at that point. And so what we'll do is, just to get going, I mentioned that antimicrobial resistance is one of those challenges that's only getting worse, but one that we don't always talk about. It's that silent pandemic, it's been called by many people. But wanted to then highlight what role could there be for the arts and storytelling in order to ignite conversations, ignite a broader range of solutions, bringing more people into the conversation. And to do that, I think there's no better way than focusing in on where have we already been able to make use of the arts in order to ignite that awareness, but also that problem solving and provocation that arts and storytelling can do so well. And so with that, lucky to have Mercy and Sarah. And Mercy, you have a short presentation for us. I'll turn it to you first, but please do make sure to introduce yourself because everyone will want to know who you are. Over to you, Mercy.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Steve. And I'll be waiting for my presentation. Hello, everyone. Thank you all for participating. My name is Mercy Kukundakwe. I lead the great involvement of people living with HIV and advocacy program at Infectious Diseases Institute, College of Health Sciences, Makerere University, Kampala, Uganda. My presentation is really going to center on how we are able to use music, dance, and drama in enhancing MR education and engagement. My presentation really is going to take us back a little bit to understand Uganda's history, which is really reaching in various cultures, especially music, dance, and drama. And we are coming from that same background where we believe that because of the many cultures, people are able to understand their own cultures. So we're using the dances, the music, and drama to really convey these messages in the best way possible. Our approach really, as Infectious Diseases Institute, we have a fully fledged 5-year program, which really focuses on AMR, and some of these activities are really implemented via our clinic and research programs. And we are focusing on drama, which is a patient-led advocacy group. These are groups of people living with HIV, and this group started way back in 2008, where they joined together to educate their fellow patients in the clinic, but also in the communities, related to health outcomes. And the challenge came because of the feedback that we kept getting from patients who noted that sometimes they don't understand some of these messages. And so they suggested that if we can convey it in a way that they can understand, maybe using music, skits, poems, that would really make the sensitization and awareness very much easy. So our approach really is simply, we have done a lot of compositions of songs and poems, and on different topics, specifically AMR. As you can see in one of the pictures, we are scripting. We're coming up with a theme and the specific topics to include in our skits, in our music, and in our dances. What key messages should we be presenting? And we also have done a lot of community engagement, where we have taken some of these performances to our communities around, like in markets, in trading centers, in different places, really to send out that message about the misuse of antibiotics. We have also included... Oh, sorry, I'm on the drama group approach, which is slide number 5. Sorry. Yes.
Yeah, it's that one.
Thank you. So, like I was saying, we have done a lot of composition of songs, and these are songs of health messages like MR, poems and anthems, and we've also composed a lot of skits. And we believe that some of this information and these approaches are really relatable to our communities. We really act it as it happens in the community. We have also done a lot of traditional dances, and we believe that is more even engaging. We employ a lot of instruments like drums, and that helps us a lot, especially at the angle of mobilization. So with all these approaches that we have employed, we have seen a lot of improvement, a lot of education and awareness of these messages, both at our clinic but also at a community level. So we believe that by using music, dance, and drama, first of all, it's one of the most cost-effective approach. It's a very reliable social approach. And 2, we all come from cultures. We all have different cultures. Some of them, we don't have to pay money, to learn how to dance, to learn our own culture. So it's really a social tool that is more relatable, that is easy, and also compared to other tools like social media, which many people may not be able to access. So we believe by using music, dance, and drama, especially in Uganda, would really send out a clear message, and also would make it much easier for the people to understand. So for me, with that, honestly, that's what we have really done, and we are seeing really a great transformation. And this is something that we have seen over the years, and all credits really goes to the team. The drama team is a team of about 15 people, and they really are a team of 15 people, young, vibrant, talented young men and women. And we thank the organization and also this platform for giving us this opportunity to present our work. Thank you.
Thanks so much. It's such a great, thank you for helping us kickstart by showing such a great example of making use of the arts to elevate, to bring awareness, to engage people in different ways than people are often engaged. So big congratulations to you and your colleagues for that.
Thank you.
Sarah, I'd love to turn over to you, but first make sure to introduce yourself, and we'd love to hear some of the amazing work that you're doing. Sarah.
Sure, thank you. I'm just waiting for my slides to come up. I was just thinking it would be really joyful if we saw more of that in the NHS spaces that we exist in. I'd love to see more dance and drama, etc. So while I'm waiting for my slides, I'll just introduce myself a bit more. Oh, here we go. I've worked in TV, animation, comics, escape games, all with science and health themes. I've destroyed the world in many, many ways, as you can see here from these slides, but also sort of explored what-if scenarios and how we actually sort of survive, or how we don't travel into some of these sort of futuristic worlds. I worked on a comic called Surgeon X with artist John Watkiss and the amazing editor Karen Berger, who set up Vertigo, published by Image Comics. Surgeon X is the story of Rosa Scott, a surgeon trying to work in 2036 when the antibiotics are failing. Importantly, the world doesn't look that different. Life goes on. And it's the what if we do nothing to develop antibiotics story. Her twin sister works as a microbiologist with a keen interest in history, and she's trying to find sort of new antibiotics. Now, the characters, it's a story about family working together to solve some of the problems of the antibiotic crisis, but using the enjoyment of thrillers and complicated family dynamics. We look at the ethics involved in this world. Rosa is Anglo-Burmese, and her family and her contacts are global. She's far from perfect, but we also get to see what's going on around the world through the lens of her experiences. There's a bit of moral philosophy in there, ethics. The behaviours of the characters make us think about how we might behave in the future, and also maybe some of the scientists to sort of think about what a world might look like. Rosa treats the patients who she feels deserves to be saved. We also, with this sort of story, took it out to Comic-Cons and to museums, and we sort of asked the audience what they thought. We asked sort of people at the Science Museum, but also Predator, as you can see. We sort of consulted Predator. And what we found is that people really enjoyed speaking to experts. They really enjoyed engaging and finding more about the antibiotic crisis and what it involved. So I would say sort of very much so with the experts, it's sort of go out there, speak to people, have those conversations, but look at it from a range of perspectives, from the science to the surgery, to the history, the philosophy, and the ethics. So what did we learn during this process? Well, I think we need a clearer language around antibiotic resistance. We need our artists and storytellers, as well as our scientists and social scientists, to sort of think about this work. You can never design stories for one audience. It's granular. We've got different audiences around the globe, and we're facing different problems. For some, it's about using less antibiotics. For others, people in certain countries aren't getting antibiotics that they need. Also, I think that sort of drama stories are very different to news stories and to social media. So storytellers need to design for those platforms, and I think we need to think quite deeply about that. I think as well, something that I'm really conscious of is that when we're engaging with young audience, this comic was designed for adults. Climate change is an example where I think we're in danger of scaring our young people, and just by sort of educating them, we're not thinking about their mental health. So I think young people are bombarded with the problems that we have created. So I think we have a duty of care to think about how we frame these issues and how we look at solutions and how we can take action rather than just being a frightening experience for our young people. So I think, finally, the world feels like a scary and dangerous place right now. So how do we tell stories around AMR, make them funny, satire, using sort of gallows humour? We talked about creating all sorts of different stories, from cozy games to sort of immersive experiences. How can we be appealing and hopeful about storytelling when we're exploring something as scary as AMR? We need that positive sort of storytelling aspect to it, I would say.
Great. So thanks so much for sharing and also helping and highlighting the amazing work that you're doing. We are going to do a bit of a shift of folks, so in order to make sure that we maintain the audio and the video, so I will thank both Sarah and Mercy as I invite three additional folks to come up, so Caitlin, Emily, and Allison. And as we're making that shift, I will just make the highlights that I think one thing from particularly around Sarah in her presentation was really emphasizing that the arts are and storytelling in different ways is an opportunity to really it's really an opportunity to actually peel back some of the layers and the nuance around issues, and sometimes I think we think of as a non-expert but lover of arts and stories, you sometimes are hit by sometimes it's the simplicity, other times it's the nuance, and antimicrobial resistance is described very often by scientists and policymakers. This is an issue that's really hard to talk about because it is nuanced, and I think that work really emphasizes there's many different ways of approaching it to bring out that and make that a key, something that's tackled head on. So congratulations. I do one thing that before I turn it to our next panel, which will focus on some discussions that have been happening today and yesterday. Wanted to remark that for those in the room and maybe online, you might be able to see that there's these beautiful illustrations that have attempted to, and that when reading them, clearly summarize sort of pretty hefty conversations that have happened over the last couple of days. This webinar focused on the power of art and storytelling to tackle AMR was also the focus of a 2-day intensive workshop that brought together people who are here in person at Wellcome Trust in London in order to tackle that head on. And so I'm delighted that we have an opportunity here in this webinar about what some of those discussions were. And I know, Caitlin, from having worked with you before for many years, one thing that in advance of this workshop that I know you were quite excited about was being able to create a space where ideas that could be identified that are just ideas that are safe to try, and ideas not necessarily that are going to be the ones that would definitely be carried forward, but let's be bold enough to figure out what are some things that we can try to be more experimental, be provocative, take risk. And so maybe first, Caitlin, if I can turn it to you, would love to hear a little bit of your takeaway from some of the discussions you've been having over these last couple of days. But first, introduce yourself.
So I'm Caitlin Fisher. I'm with the Immersive Storytelling Lab at York University and have been helping to organize these 2 days. And it's just been such an honor. I think part of getting to the ideas is also getting the right people in the room. This is an incredible mix. And I think I'd even go so far as to say, during AMR Awareness Week, I think it's a really it's really novel and important to have a room that is filled with a majority of creative people, with critical people here from the policy and the science side, but also we have not had, or at least I have not had this opportunity to be in a room with this many artists, with so many diverse practices, who are all invested in thinking about how we might tackle this global crisis. And so, we haven't solved it in 2 days, but getting to safe to try ideas, getting the right mix of people, and trying to create an environment, here at Wellcome in London, to bring people in to start to think blue sky as well as practical, to bring in, I was just blown away first hearing about people's past practices, but then kind of harnessing that great energy and thinking about what we might build going forward. And there are people here from traditional print, incredible work in that field, to immersive. There are important curators here, and sort of thinking about this moment historically, but also how we could be imagining tools and technologies and stories into the future, thinking about diverse audiences. It's been sort of exhausting and amazing and inspiring. And I guess we'll try to surface some of those safe to try ideas rather than starting with those. But I have to say it's been, I think it's been fantastic to have it this week. Thank you, Wellcome Trust, for helping to make this happen. And just thanks to everybody here, and we'll be hearing more from the participants, but it's been amazing.
Great. Maybe, Emily, can I turn to you? But first, of course, introduce yourself and any thoughts around the last couple of days would be great.
Thank you, Stephen. Yeah, so I'm Emily Scott Deering. I'm a freelance exhibition curator, but also the public engagement lead for the Fleming Initiative. And this is such a delightful conversation for us to be part of because of what you say, that we're foregrounding the public engagement, the communication, the public side of what is a societal issue, not just a technical issue. So Fleming Initiative brings together researchers, policymakers and public, and it's wonderful to focus our energy on the public side in particular in these last few days. We've had wonderful conversations about the importance of storytelling, in particular around the value of authenticity, real stories from real people sharing their lived experience, to elevate the value of empathy in our audiences and to communicate the personal relevance of this, which can seem an enormous, overwhelming issue when you tell it as a story in terrifyingly large statistics. So we wanted to bring it down to the power of the individual. We've also talked a lot about visualization and gamification, and there's amazing people in the room who've got a variety of different skills for bringing those things across. But we talked about that because the data can be cold and overwhelming, and because the concepts are difficult. It's an invisible crisis, and we want to find ways to make it visible and to make the complex ideas comprehensible. And we also reminded ourselves, because often this is a conversation around, as it rightly should be, around AMR patient survivor stories, that lived experience from a human health perspective. But we also reminded ourselves to go beyond human health to a One Health, to a broader story, to bring in the environmental aspect, the animal aspect of AMR, and remind ourselves that that is a story for the public as well, because it's about consumer power to drive change. So I think building awareness and comprehension was part of our conversation, but motivation about the most effective ways through which we could drive behaviour change has also been a real focus for us.
Right. Before I go to Alison, if I can ask a quick follow-up, I think you said it so perfectly when you said the numbers are cold. And as a researcher and as someone who's working with a lot of researchers who very often are putting forward that number of over 1 million people die every year from AMR. I did it when introducing the webinar. And in some respects, the bigger the number, the more it's incomprehensible. It's
immobilizing, isn't it?
It can be immobilizing. Any reactions, either based on all of your great work or the discussions of the last couple of days around how do we get through that? Because on one hand, the scale of the challenge is partially what should deserve more of our attention and awareness, but at the same time, it's that exact scale, as you said, which can be immobilizing.
I think you're right. I think we need to be able to tell, as one of our contributors said beautifully on the first day, tell the right story in numbers so that we cut through and we set the scene for what needs to change and why. But then I do think it's about zooming in on the human impact, the individual detail. And I think one of the really important things to talk about, which we've also discussed a lot, is the way that this is not one enormous problem. This is 1 million problems experienced differently in so many different contexts. The impacts of AMR are hugely varied and inequitable, and sometimes that's about lack of access to antibiotics, sometimes that's about misuse of antibiotics. There's a lot of different aspects to this crisis, so it's a complex story to tell, and it's not the story for any one person to tell. We've talked a lot about identifying powerful frameworks that we might learn from and generously share, to be experimented with, executed in different local contexts by local communities, so that the stories that they tell are relevant and appropriate and cut through. As we heard from Mercy, there's particular disciplines that will work in particular settings, and there's particular emphasis of story that will work in different settings.
Thanks so much, Emily. Alison, I want to bring you in to the conversation. You have done so many, I know you've done so many different things. You've also been one of the chief organizers of this workshop. Over to you, what are some of your thoughts around both the power of art and storytelling to address AMR, but also about some of the key things that you've been excited about talking about over the last couple of days?
It's been fabulous. I mean, I'm just looking around the room here at the people that we've got, the Brain Trust, all of the sort of networked intelligence that we've evolved over this past 2 days, and will hopefully continue to keep going forward with. One of the cool things, I'm a postdoctoral fellow in both the Immersive Storytelling Lab and the Global Strategy Lab, and so the idea of kind of bringing together lots of people coming from different languages in a way, and finding ways for storytelling to even translate between those of us in the room, so that we can kind of figure out what needs to be done, what does the public need to know that they maybe know but they don't know, or they don't know enough about, and sort of mobilizing all of our various different talents from our disciplines together, and finding ways to kind of collaborate on those things, but especially to use storytelling to move even beyond real stories. I mean, what's fabulous about enabling people to tell their actual stories, their real life experiences with antimicrobial resistance, is that is powerful. There is also power in fiction. right? There's a power in concentrating an idea into its essence, or twisting it in a way that you never would think about it in a certain, real life setting, or looking at it from the distant past, or looking at it from the future, as Sarah Kenny's comic does. So the different ways that art can, take off from reality in a way that makes reality more real, oddly enough, right? So I think that's something that I've really learned from, especially the sort of writers and the storytellers in the room. The way that they would listen to what someone, from policy would say, and then go, hang on, what if you took that and spun it around to look at it from this way?
I love that. Before we do a shift in bringing in others from the workshop to share some words, any additional comments you want to make sure, Caitlin, Emily, Alison, to mention about what's maybe exciting you about where this work goes from here?
I would just say that, the mix of minds, the possibility in this room is where the power really sits. And I definitely think we've planted seeds of all sorts of more than safe to try, really exciting potential future projects. So it's been a huge privilege to be part of that. And I think we've acknowledged that this is about storytelling and building awareness, but we've also recognized that it isn't just about telling the story, it's about mobilizing change.
Mm-hmm. And I would also say that it's been interesting thinking about who the audience for that change is, exactly what change. We have aligned some of our conversation with the global, with global goals that have been thought about and shared with us so generously from scientists and policymakers. And at the same time, we are thinking about that not all of these conversations will be, that not all of the things that we make will be targeted to policymakers, but some can be, and some will be targeted elsewhere. And I think that's one of the things that that really excited me, that there was such a mindfulness around that action has to be sort of multi-pronged, and that stories would travel in different ways. So I'm just really excited to see what happens next.
I love it. Maybe as Alison, before I turn to you, we can maybe start the change in rotating.
Yep, absolutely.
So I'll invite, so I'll thank Caitlin and Emily, and invite Matushri and Kenpong, as well as I think a couple of others who are contributing. You know who you are, I think, to come on up. But Alison, over to you. Any sort of where to from here?
I think one of the interesting things about language, which I was mentioning, is that we sometimes talk about driving behavior change. And again, taking perspective, if I am the audience member and somebody is telling me they are driving my behavior change, how does that language resonate with them? Do they feel like someone's telling them what to do, or is like trying to manipulate them in some way? So, in public health, we have compliance with, drug use, for example, and that makes sense within the public health sphere. But the word compliance to maybe a patient sounds like you are being controlled. So I think another thing that we've really kind of discovered is poets. Please sit. Yes, thank you.
And in fact, three of us going to chairs.
Yeah, maybe we'll do two at a time, or three at a time?
Oh, no, that's...
Are we good? Okay, cool.
Yeah, we can
squeeze that. Sorry, I'm stage managing at the same time. So yeah, I think one of the things that's most important to me is how do we make whatever it is that we all collectively as a society and as a world who want to still be able to have surgery without risking dying from a routine surgery. We all definitely want that. I don't think there's many people in the world who would like to die from AMR. But how do we tell that story so that rather than it's like, you're not the boss of me, I am being told what to do, my behavior change is being driven, it's more like I am drawn to it because the story or the art is attractive, and I know what I want to save.
I love that. And it's not just me in the chat I see for the webinar. Hannah highlighting how making reality more real through stories is really quite a powerful idea. So big thanks, Alison.
Thank you.
We're now going to turn to additional workshop participants, some who've flown from quite far away in order to be part of this experience and contribute to thinking about how to leverage the power of art and storytelling to tackle AMR. Maybe Madhushri, can I maybe turn first to you? What will you be taking away from this workshop and going forward?
Firstly, it was a huge privilege to be in this room with so many amazing people who've been thinking about these problems for such a long time, but also from such different perspectives. And I think what I really enjoyed, and I think I will take away, is the sort of fearlessness that was there to kind of tackle questions that didn't really have answers. Like often it's very solution based, and here there was, because we were so open about sort of approaching the issue, complex questions like who is the audience really, how do we even define what AMR is, and the challenges around communicating it, to be ready to grapple with the identity crisis that AMR has. I think that was something that was really interesting for me, to be really ready to deal with the uncertainty around communicating this and being aware of the fact that we didn't have all the answers, and equally to question fundamental things like what is it that we're aiming for? Is it behavior change, right? And is that really the solution, and where does the responsibility lie? So I think what I'm going to take back is that when at the start of such kind of big ideas and big projects, it's often important to have people in the room who would be ready and willing to take on these sort of complex, gritty questions before you dive into these projects. So for me, that was a really big plus point of this session.
Oh, I love that. And maybe, Kempong, can I turn to you also? Actually, first, Madhushri, if you can introduce yourself to make sure everyone online knows who just said that great contribution.
Oh, yeah. I'm Madhushri. I'm an art science curator and designer from Bangalore in India, and work mainly with public engagement for science. Yeah.
Amazing.
Okay, my name is Kanpong. I'm from Mahidol Oxford Tropical Medicine Research Unit from Thailand. I'm a science communicator and a cartoonist. And what I want to take from here is the opportunities, I think, and possibilities, because as only one art people in my team, I see a lot of limitation when I work. And when I come here, I see a lot of possibilities, where I see so many new, fresh idea and method or technique that I can take. And I think we can have a good journey together, have a good connection. And I think if we do it together, a possibility we will wider and wider.
Kempong, can I ask you just a quick follow-up? To what extent, when you're thinking as a science communicator and a cartoonist, to what extent does a real live health challenge like antimicrobial resistance serve as a point of inspiration for that work versus as an immobilization, as Emily so beautifully described earlier? To what extent, do you, in your work, is it something you can jump off point, or does it kind of immobilize?
I think for me, AMR is a great challenge, and also very interesting things to because AMR will it will be very difficult to eliminate it, right? But we have to cope with it along the way, and we have to learn new things. So I think for me is be a challenge and inspiration for me to do the work.
Amazing, thank you. Maybe before maybe Isaac, if I can turn to you, first introduce yourself. You're a political scientist in engaging. You've been doing work on antimicrobial resistance for quite some time. Tell us about some of the ideas that you're taking away from this workshop around the power of art and storytelling.
Sure, thank you, Stephen. My name is Isaac. I'm a political scientist and assistant professor of law at CIBO, which is the Center for Advanced Studies in Bioscience Innovation Law at the University of Copenhagen. And it's so hard to pick just one thing that I'll be taking away. There's so many wonderful ideas from a diverse range of unique and very powerful perspectives. I think what stands out to me, or at least what's in my mind right now, is how it all seems like we have the same purpose, whether it's science, policy, or storytelling. It's about reaching individuals. It's about elevating individual voices and ultimately improving the lives of individuals around the world, wherever they are. And so I think, to me, that's renewed my sense of purpose, because sometimes research can feel very abstracted from the realities, and the impacts of your work is often years before you see that come to fruition. And so I think for me right now, it's just, holding on to that, the objective that we're trying to achieve in making the world healthier, whether it's through science, policy, or storytelling.
And Val, last but not least, I would love for you to introduce yourself and sure.
We can have one more last but not least.
So
maybe we can swap out
good. So I'm hearing thanks so much, Alison. So the penultimate, not last, second last, and not second least. Val, over to you.
Yeah, I'm a writer, and I spend most of my time alone in a room. So it's really great to get out and be allowed to play well with others. My family would probably say I don't do. But I first encountered AMR here in this very building a few years ago as part of the Wellcome Experimental Stories program, and out of that I wrote a three-act radio drama about antimicrobial resistance called Resistance, which subsequently, with a collaborator, we turned into a graphic novel. So for me, this is an exciting chance to revisit something I already knew a bit about. But I think for me, coming to a gathering like this is that I'm always aware that somewhere along the line is going to be a spark, a moment of inspiration, something that's going to make my head go on fire and give me an idea for storytelling. And that moment happened today, where we're talking about Fleming and the serendipity of his discovery of antibiotics, of penicillin. And I began to think, what would the world be like if that moment hadn't happened? And what does that tell us about where we are now? And what does it tell us about how we can build the future? So that's my big takeaway from today, is that as a set of ideas that I have to go away and think about. And the great thing about working with the group this afternoon was that we took that initial idea and expanded it in various different directions to involve locality, to involve different forms of expression like dance, like movement. And so it felt like an expansion, I suppose, of what had originally been an idea that was just mine. And that's the joy of coming to something like this, is you take your own ideas and you work with other people, and something different comes out of it.
Yeah. Well, before I turn to Sarah, I wanted to get a sense from you. One of the things that we're talking about, art and storytelling. Of course, there's such diversity across the arts. Kampong, a cartoonist and science communicator, yourself a writer, others a filmmaker. There's so much diversity it's when you think about leveraging the power of arts then to help tackle a big challenge like antimicrobial resistance, what are the challenges in connecting the different kinds of artistic practice in order to bring together or not together as is appropriate or not appropriate?
I think what we all have to understand is that there's no one single form of artistic expression that's going to reach everybody. So we have to work together to collaborate, to find different ways to reach the wider community. And so that, again, is something that's been very apparent to me over the last couple of days, is the different possibilities there are for reaching out to people in different locations, in different professions, in different levels of society, if you like, and communicate to them in those different ways. And that's really important. It's not just what I, as an individual artist, can do, or what anybody else in the room as an individual artist can do. It's what together we can do to jump off each other's ideas.
I love that. Thanks, Val. Sarah, I want to invite you in first to introduce yourself and then to share what your thoughts are about what thoughts from this workshop you're taking forward. But before you do that, I did want to remind anyone who is joining online, there is an opportunity after Sarah and after I ask maybe another question of the panel to ask your questions. So please do feel free to use the question and answer feature. And of course, those in the room, you also have an opportunity to ask any questions. And so I will ask the panel, as though this is the last panel in the webinar, you'll get to stay up here. No more stage managing transitions. But Sarah, over to you first to introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, my name's Sarah Tico. I work in this kind of bizarre, fascinating field of immersive storytelling in healthcare. So I create projects where we bring together artists and scientists and researchers to think about how they can be used therapeutically and educationally. And I'm also co-founder of the XR Health Alliance. We do a lot of work around creating policy for how do we make immersive experiences available through the NHS as well. And so, I mean, it's hard not to say repeat so many amazing things that have already been talked about today, like the sheer breadth of people working across so many different mediums and art forms and research and I think like not just thinking about storytelling, but the role of playful approaches and how impactful technology and interactive media can be in not just shoving stories down people's throats, but having that two-way conversation and thinking about like what emerges as well. What are the things that we don't know about antimicrobial resistance, for example, and really reminding us that co-creation approach. It's not just having this expertise in the room, but thinking about how we can invite people from all over the world to collaborate and bring those stories. And thinking about how we localize things. I think that's been a really common theme as well, that we're talking about a global issue, how we can make that relevant at a national level, but also localize in a meaningful way that isn't just adaptation or a little bit of translation, but how that really fits. And how we can look at all those different aspects of it, of AMR, be it around having pets or clothes or food. Like I've learned so much because this is not my area of expertise at all. But I think ultimately I've come away just realizing, you know, this is such a complex issue, and I think therefore we need complex approaches. And that can be complex technologies, but it doesn't always need to be technology as well. I think that's why I've been so inspired by Mercy's work, that is around just dance and playfulness and, you know, making the waiting room a lively space is so impactful. And that ultimately, even if there are complex approaches, that ultimately it does need to be elegant and simple in the end as well if we want to really reach people. So I think there's been lots of themes around how work can be participatory, decentralized, and that it's made me want to be more conscious of my own view as well, and the limitations that we have living in the global north and the privileges that we have attached to us, and constantly revisiting, are we doing the right thing, and who else do we need to continue to invite to be in that process as well.
Thank you. As I give a little bit more time to those online to ask questions, but also those in the room. One question for me to the panel. I don't know who to direct it to, but one question for me is around when we think of, if the goal is awareness and action on antimicrobial resistance, do the stories and the art that we engage with, is it different than when we're trying to engage, let's say, politicians versus, let's say, general public? I guess what I'm sort of saying there is, are politicians people? But is there a difference, or is it the same if the goal is around action? It's a question I actually get quite a bit, and so how lucky that we have a panel of folks who might be thinking about some of that, or might have some ideas.
I mean, I think Emily has been saying this throughout the 2 days, that politicians are people, and that you need to get the emotional approach right. But I do think that in a lot of our discussions around audience, it came up about how the stories are slightly different when you're telling them to different people, and they're often looking for different things as well. So I think a lot of that influences or drives the stories that are created. So I definitely, even if it's not just policymakers and the general public, within the public itself, the audiences can be so different, and that could influence the story.
Yeah, it's not just politicians versus members of the public.
Yeah.
Whatever your audience is, you have to target what you're doing towards what they can relate to, can respond to. But whoever you're speaking to, the key elements I think you need to have are empathy and respect for them. But that has to inform what you do.
I think to add to that as well, then, I mean, yeah, we're all here because we're united by the power of storytelling, right? And we started this event with talking about stories that have changed our lives and been transformative to us. So I think that always needs to be at the heart of it. But I do also believe in the power of data, and that when you are talking to politicians and people that are ultimately looking at their budgets and saying, why should I care? I think it's about having them both side by side and saying, this is what the impact is, and being able to quantify that is important. But there is, that's where we have the complex approach, and we bring in everything, and we can have a rich tapestry of information that does come together.
Yeah, I think people have a different language that they're talking. Some specific group, like a gamer or people who read a lot of comics. They have their own language, right? I think we should tailor-made each communication material for them. I think that's the best way to reach them deeply.
Yeah, and I guess when asking the question about arts and storytelling around politicians versus people, of course, many politicians, some of the best politicians would be master storytellers. Probably not enough. Probably not enough are artists. Because that'd be great if more artists were ministers and prime ministers and such. But
more con artists in politics.
But it's an interesting interplay between and how if to the extent we agree that politicians can often be excellent storytellers and make use of that device or approach. Certainly, it speaks to something. It's tapping into something that I guess today in the workshop and in this webinar we're tapping into to address antimicrobial resistance. We do have an online question, so let me go there. I love the question from Sean, who's asked, which I'll direct to the panel, what 3 things would enable arts and storytelling to have the most impact on the challenge of antimicrobial resistance? What are the top three things? And I think we can turn to the panel, but we can also actually turn to the room, if that's okay, panel, so I don't put too much on it. If there are other folks in the room who might want to help answer Sean's great question, it was what 3 things would enable arts and storytelling to have the most impact on the challenge of antimicrobial resistance? Emily, over to you.
I think for me, I'll mention one so that everyone else can also contribute. For me, it's the message. So the thing is, what message are you sending out there? So and also the audience. Once you understand those 2 things, you should be able to go with your story.
Okay, I like that. Sarah, I think you also had your hand up.
Yeah, I think just working more collectively, and I think we've had this problem with climate change. We work in silos and we work in fractured ways. Scientists work here, historians work here, sociologists work here, and they don't talk to each other. And I think, if we learn quite quickly to bring artists and scientists and historians or whatever, learn from the past, learn from psychology, work together, and use the sort of shared language approach to this, I think we'd be so much more effectively. I just think we work faster.
I think just to add on to that a little, we did have some discussions around how impactful it can be to understand that artists have skills that are more than just translating the piece of scientific information. So sometimes it is that. Sometimes it is you have people assisting to communicate a message. But I think one of the things that I will be leading with is just being inspired again around what these skills are, and sometimes just, I think, a respect for how art can help to move the conversation and to let artists be full partners as we try to tackle this challenge.
I think access is one of the most important elements here. We have to figure out who has access to what particular media and how we get across to the biggest number of people. Me writing a radio drama for Radio 4 is all well and good, but to a large extent I'm preaching to the choir. We need to find routes to get a wider audience, a wider reach.
Are there any other related areas that folks in the room feel might be good exemplars in which to look to. For example, Sarah, you mentioned the climate change space, the role that arts and storytelling have played there. Are there any thoughts as we get to the very end of the webinar? Any kind of final thoughts about what we can learn from other areas?
We need to be in soap operas. We need to be reaching millions of people, right? I would love to see soap operas, writers from around the world sit around the table and discuss it. Soap operas from India, from Drama Buff, all over, and sort of thinking about the stories that can emerge in spaces where everyday people are sharing.
Yeah.
So we need a Bollywood and a Nollywood star to get a drug resistance infection, and hopefully through the power of initiatives and researchers working together with artists and others and policymakers to tackle it. So I love that. Maybe a last comment over here, and then we'll conclude.
Really simple thing. I think hope is important. You mentioned that a lot, not doom and gloom narratives, but hope and trusting in not the selfishness of human beings, but the altruism and kindness and compassion, knowing that humans genuinely want to help each other and make a difference. That art of hope and art of our own altruism and the will to work together to drive change, that feels really important. And learning from the narratives of AIDS and HIV, allowing the fact that we're in an era where people knew nothing, how quickly patients became authors of knowledge and took control of narrative and collaborations between art, science, and people with this experience created very quickly new narratives and new possibilities for change.
I think that's such a great way to bring the webinar to a close. I think the thing that I've felt the most, I guess, in this room, but also from the comments and questions online, it's that energy around making use of and leveraging and engaging the arts and storytelling in addressing this challenge, recognizing this is a big, potentially a mobilizing challenge if we only focus on the numbers, but the power of engaging people in other ways is what's needed to get us through, to make a difference on a problem that up until now has each year only been getting worse. So with that idea of hope to conclude on, I just want to give a big thank you to everybody who was here at the workshop, everyone who joined online, and to the Global Strategy Lab and the Immersive Storytelling Lab for organizing this and bringing all of us together. Thank you very much, and let's make this World Antimicrobial Awareness Week an important one. Thank you all.